The Galactic Academy of Varith Prime was considered the safest institution in the known universe, a marble and glass crown floating in orbit above a gentle blue star, filled with the soft children of civilized worlds. No violence, no conflict, just scholarship. That was the sales pitch, anyway. Nobody had bothered to update the brochure since the humans arrived. Jack arrived on a Tuesday, by Earth reckoning, carrying a duffel bag, a cracked thermos of instant coffee, and the kind of calm that comes not from peace, but from having survived things that would dissolve lesser beings into memory. He was 22 years old, enrolled in xenobiology on a merit scholarship. He had brown hair that needed cutting, eyes the color of old steel, and a scar along his left forearm that he never explained. He was human. That was enough. The Croth were 3 students, enormous, blue-skinned, and accustomed to ruling the social architecture of Varith Prime the way gravity rules a planet, invisibly, completely, without apology. Their leader, a broad-shouldered specimen named Voric, had a face like a geological event and the temperament to match. He had never in his 6 years at the Academy met a creature he could not intimidate into cooperation. He spotted Jack on the first day in the dining hall, eating alone, reading a battered paperback, utterly unbothered by the social calculus happening around him. Something about that stillness offended Voric on a cellular level. "Human," Voric announced, dropping his enormous tray across from Jack with a crash designed to shatter concentration. "You are in the seat of researcher Telm. Find another." Jack turned a page. "There's no assigned seating in the dining hall." "There is now." Jack looked up then, not with fear, not with anger, but with a kind of patient assessment, like a geologist reading rock layers, like a man who had looked at dangerous things so long he had forgotten to be afraid of them. He closed his book, picked up his tray, and moved to a different table. Not because he was scared, because his coffee was getting cold, and this conversation wasn't worth the temperature drop. Voric watched him go with satisfaction. He did not yet understand what he had done. He had not threatened a prey animal. He had poked a Deathworld Survivor and gotten a shrug, which is, in the taxonomy of danger, far more alarming. Emma found Jack in the xenobiology lab 3 days later, carefully dissecting something that smelled extraordinary in the worst possible way. She was human too, 20 years old, from New Zealand, with the kind of freckled practicality that comes from growing up on an island surrounded by things that bite. She was studying xenolinguistics and had been on Varith Prime for a semester already. "You know Voric's telling everyone you ran from him," she said, perching on a lab stool. "I moved tables," Jack said, not looking up. "Different thing. Not in Croth's social structure. In their culture, yielding space is submission. He thinks you're marked now. Is to push around." Jack set down his scalpel and finally looked at her. "What's your read on Croth threshold for escalation?" Emma blinked. Most new humans asked, "Is it going to get bad?" Jack had skipped ahead to tactical analysis. She liked him immediately. They escalate in public. They need an audience. They won't move privately. Too much reputational risk if it goes wrong. "Good to know," Jack said, and picked his scalpel back up. "That's it." "Good to know. That's it." The incident happened on a Friday, during the Academy's open forum period, the wide central atrium where students of 50 species gathered between lectures. Voric had planned it carefully, his 2 companions flanking him, 40 witnesses, Jack walking alone with his books and his thermos. "Human," Voric called, loud enough to carry. Heads turned. This was the important part, the turning of heads. "You disrespected a Croth elder 3 days ago. There must be a reckoning." Jack stopped walking. He set his books down on a bench with the unhurried precision of someone who has decided that whatever is coming next deserves his full attention. He turned around. "You're not an elder. You're a 24-year-old student," Jack said. "And I moved tables. You've been plotting a confrontation about a table." Laughter rippled through the atrium. Not much, but enough. Voric's crest darkened. This was not how the script ran. The prey was supposed to shrink. On Croth Prime, this insult would be settled in the ring, Voric announced, stepping forward, drawing himself up to his full 2.4 meters. He was genuinely enormous. He had never once had to actually fight anyone. His size was the argument. His size had always been sufficient. Jack looked up at him. There was a pause. "I grew up in northern Canada. I have been charged by a moose. I have reset a dislocated shoulder alone, in a forest, in February. I once spent 11 hours in a broken boat waiting for a coast guard that arrived to find me eating the emergency rations and playing cards by myself. I am not asking you to fight me. I am telling you, as clearly and kindly as I can, that you do not want to find out what a human raised on a death world considers a fair fight. The atrium went quiet in the way that large spaces go quiet when something fundamentally shifts. Voric had studied xenobiology. He knew, academically, that Earth held the record for the highest predator density of any inhabited planet. He knew that humans had evolved not as apex predators, but alongside apex predators, developing the peculiar survival strategy of being too stubborn to die. He knew this the way one knows that stars are hot, as a fact, not as a feeling. Now, looking at Jack's eyes, at that flat, patient, steel-colored absence of fear, he began to understand it as a feeling. Voric's companion, a Croth named Seto who was, privately, the only one of the three with any sense, put a hand on Voric's arm. "Brother," he said quietly, "we should go." Voric did not move for a long moment. Jack did not move at all. He simply waited, with the infinite patience of a species that had learned to outlast ice ages. Then Voric turned and walked away. It was not a retreat, he would later tell himself. It was a strategic reassessment. But the 40 students in the atrium saw what they saw, and what they saw was a Croth who had looked into a human's eyes and decided that whatever lived behind them was not something to provoke. Emma appeared at Jack's elbow as he picked his books back up. "Northern Canada," she said. "Was any of that true?" "The moose was real," Jack said. "The shoulder was real. The Coast Guard took 9 hours, not 11. And I wasn't playing cards, I was reading." "But close enough." Emma laughed, short and bright. "And the part about not wanting to find out what you consider a fair fight." Jack picked up his thermos, checked the temperature, was apparently satisfied. "I never said I wanted to fight him. I said he didn't want to find out. Those are different things." The Academy's Xenosociology department wrote a paper about the incident 6 months later. It circulated in quiet academic circles under the title, "Threat Communication in Deathworld Species: How Homo sapiens Signals Danger Without Aggression." The paper noted, with scholarly restraint, that the human subject had not raised his voice, had not adopted a fighting posture, had not made any physical contact, and had defused a public dominance challenge using only language and what the paper carefully described as an unclassified quality of stillness. The paper's lead author, Professor Ulvin of the Xenosociology faculty, interviewed Jack for the study. She asked him what he had been thinking in that moment in the atrium, when Voric stood over him. Jack was quiet for a moment. Then, "I was thinking that he was scared. He just didn't know it yet." Professor Ulvin recorded this and sat with it for a long time afterward. She had spent 40 years studying species. She had never encountered one that could identify fear in an opponent before the opponent felt it themselves. She added a footnote to the paper. It read, simply, "Further study required. Recommend caution." Voric, for his part, transferred his seat in xenobiology to a table on the far side of the room. He told no one why. He never spoke to Jack again. But sometimes, in the dining hall, he would watch the human across the room, reading his battered paperbacks, drinking his terrible coffee, utterly unbothered, and feel something he did not have a word for in Croth. In English, the closest word is awe.